ఇప్పుడు అడ్మిట్ వాళ్ళు కొడుతున్నానండి అయితే ఓకే
కొట్టండి.
ఇప్పుడు అడ్మిట్ వాళ్ళు కొడుతున్నానండి అయితే ఓకే
కొట్టండి. I think Ramanathan ji joined. Make him as co-host.
Yeah.
Professor Srikanth ji joined. Srikanth ji, Aditya ji.
Namaskaram.
Namaste ji.
Namaste.
Co-host.
Since we are now at 7 p.m. So first,
Yeah.
namaskaram to all. Thank you for whoever has joined us at exactly 7 p.m. So we will just need another 5 minutes while we wait for other speakers to join. As soon as they join, we will immediately commence with today's session. Shastriji, can we commence in about 2 minutes?
I'm waiting. Only thing I'm waiting for our Suryanarayan ji to join. Chamalamadaka Suryanarayan ji. Manjushri Hegde ji may join little late because we stuck in traffic, I think, in Mumbai. So you have to reshuffle, I think. Okay.
So I think in the interest.
Suryanarayan ji, waiting for our Suryanarayan ji Jamalamadaka. He said I am joining. Let us see. I start with Vijnan Bharati mantra. Yeah.
Yes.
Otherwise.
Yes.
Okay. सभी को नमस्कार. ॐ पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते ईशावास्यमिदं सर्वं यत्किञ्च जगत्यां जगत् तेन त्यक्तेन भुञ्जीथा मा गृधः कस्य स्विद्धनम् विद्याञ्च अविद्याञ्च यस्तद्वेदो भयं सः अविद्यया मृत्युं तीर्त्वा विद्ययामृतमश्नुते. सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः, सर्वे सन्तु निरामयाः, सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु, मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत्. ओम शांति शांति शांति.
Dhanyavad, Shastriji. So, namaskaram to everyone here who's attended for today's the first session of SaVijnanam's talk series. So, on behalf of Vigyan Bharati, I warmly welcome all of you to today's session. And we are organizing this talk on the auspicious occasion of Shankar Jayanti, which was technically it was yesterday, but today is the day we are having the talk. So the context of today's talk is that in spite of tremendous progress in science and technology, we are seeing that the world is facing a lot of environmental challenges, ecological challenges, ethical challenges. We are seeing that all forms of the powers of the nature are being unveiled, but they are being used more so in a destructive format than in a productive way. So there is an urgent need to rethink what is our idea of progress, and we need to move towards a more harmonious worldview. So one that balances man, machine, and nature. So the right way to start over here, in our view, is that we already have a dharmic perspective. We had a entire civilizational ethos based on knowledge and scientific rigor. So with this context in our mind, so we at Vigyan Bharati have taken up an initiative called the Center for Study of Vedic Sciences, or it's actually called SaVijnanam. And in this SaVijnanam initiative, we plan to bring together the Jivan Darshan, lived experiences, Jnana, Vijnana, and we want to root it to our own traditions, our own way of viewing the world in today's contemporary time. So SaVijnanam aims to actually create a dialogue, make a platform where we connect Vedic scholars. At the same time, we bring in modern and contemporary scientists and academicians. And with this kind of an alliance, we want to promote interdisciplinary research based in Bharatiya knowledge systems, or IKS, Indic knowledge systems as we know it today. We also intend to create a network of such institutions and individuals working in this space so that we can generate a knowledge which has a more of a harmonious and sustainable future in its outlook. So this talk series is one such step in that direction. And in today's session, the theme we have taken up is non-dualism in a multipolar world. And the reason we took this is, as you know, Shankar Jayanti and Jagadguru Sri Adi Shankaracharya ji is known for the Advaita Vedanta philosophy that is given to all of us. And at a contemporary level, we are seeing there's an Iran-US war going on, there's a Russia-Ukraine war going on. We keep seeing skirmishes from across the border into our nation. So a bipolar or a multipolar world is now emerging, and most of it in a destructive sense. It is not polarities in terms of progress, but polarities in terms of destruction that is actually happening. So that is why we want to see and explore through our scholars and through the academicians we have today with us, that how do we bridge Advaita Vedanta along with the scientific rigor that we have. And we have to understand oneness, and we have to navigate this complexity of science and technology. So today's session, we have four quite eminent, prominent, and scholarly people with us. And just to give quick introductions, and I'll give a more detailed introduction before they speak. We have Dr. V. Ramanathan ji, and he will be giving an introduction and concluding remarks. And I will introduce him shortly. And followed after him, we'll be having Dr. Manjushri Hegde ji, who is actually quite an expert in Sanskrit. She has a master's in Sanskrit. She's had a traditional training in Advaita Vedanta. Then we'll have Dr. Suryanarayana Jammalamadaga ji, who's going to be adding his own
Yeah.
Vedic wisdom into today's discussion. And finally, we'll have Professor Srikant Vedantan ji of IIT Madras also pitching in from a scientific perspective, from a Advaitic standpoint as well. So, without any further ado, let us begin today's session. And I invite Dr. Ramanathan ji, who is an associate professor in the Department of Chemistry at IIT Varanasi. And he heads the Center of Excellence in the Indic Knowledge Systems at the Institute. So, he has a strong grounding in modern science and he has a very deep engagement with the Bharatiya knowledge traditions. So he will offer right now an introductory remark, and post the three speakers, he will also offer a concluding remark. So I invite Dr. Ramanathan ji to kindly give an introductory note.
Namaste to all. Sadashiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavatpadam Shankaram Loka Shankaram. It's indeed an honor to be a small part in this mammoth effort taken up by Vijnana Bharati called through SaVijnanam, this platform of SaVijnanam, that we have assembled today to celebrate the esoteric personality Adi Shankara. And it so happens that today also happens to be the Jayanti of Ramanujacharya. So both Advaita and Vishishta Advaita taken together, it is really a momentous day, I should say, in the history of Vigyan Bharati also, to have positioned this talk where non-dualism is seen in the multipolar world, with eminent speakers who will be following and deliberating on this topic. It's indeed my both privilege and honor to introduce this session today in the capacity of the way I understand the Shankara's philosophy in my own limited manner, and the world, the geopolitics that is currently going on and its relevance. Before I proceed, I am only reminded of another Abhinava Shankara, who is normally referred to as, who lived in the 16th century, Appaya Dikshita. I am not able to recall exact verse, but he, in his, there are hundreds of works attributed to him. Unfortunately, we do not have all of them. While extolling Advaita, he begins by saying that for Advaitis, actually, there is absolutely no problem or thought of a conflict that could ever come into an Advaiti's mind. So it is with that standpoint he starts, and he says that in order to not have Shiva Dvesha, I am only kind of refuting the argument for the sake of not having Shiva Dvesha, and that's how he begins that particular work. I'm unable to recollect the exact verse though. The reason to quote him is, when we talk of conflict and when we talk of geopolitical issues, philosophizing it may look very abstract and theorizing it, but if we have Shankara in our mind and thereby Advaita, many things will actually fall in place. So this man, if I may have the audacity to call him in such a casual parlance, he traveled within small span of 32 years, as tradition records it, walked across the length and breadth of this Bhukhanda, and he established what we call as matha, perhaps translated in English as monasteries, which may not be the right translation. If you look at these the geographical location of these five mathas, it was strategic. It is like one of near to the northwest frontier, one on the eastern coast, one on the western coast, and one in the deep south. And of course, the fifth matha in the Kanchi is further down south, or on slightly south to Sringeri. So, what if a person who is relishing in Advaita, saying that Ishwar Sat and Jagan Mithya, and if everything for him is only Pashyan napichana pashyati mudho, he could have as well sat in tranquility, not having this kind of strategic locations, planning for what has come, what is to be there in the score of this, in the future score of this Bhukhanda. And yet he's not pepping up people to take up arms and go and fight for and fend for themselves. This kind of balance between the strategic location, the philosophizing, the global peace is further epitomized when we come 1500 years perhaps after Shankara, or even 2000 years after Shankara. In the medieval period, again 16th or 15th century, Acharya Madhusudana Saraswati, he kind of revived the Dashanami sect, and when he saw that the political situations in the country is again going against the well-established ethos of this country, he felt it's time to again go revive the kshatra aspect of self-defense, because if we are not alive, then there is no question of the dharma or the Vedic truths being propagated down the line. So from this vantage point, we are to listen to our scholars who have gathered today, Dr. Manjushri Hegde, Dr. Jambalamadaka Surinarayana Garu, and Dr. Shrikant Vedantam. And I'm all ears to listen to their esoteric wisdom, what they have got to contribute to this topic. And I thank the organizers once again. Maybe I will reappear when I when I'll have the wonderful opportunity to conclude. Namaste.
Dhanyavad, Ramnathanji. So thank you for your introductory remarks and setting the stage for today's program. So now I would like to invite our first speaker for today, Dr. Manjushri Hegdeji. So she had received her traditional training in Advaita Vedanta in the lineage of Swami Sachidanandendra Saraswati ji. Her research explores the philosophical developments in post-Shankara Advaita thought, examining their historical context and doctrinal implications. She has published in reputed journals such as Philosophy East and West, Journal of Hindu Studies, and Journal of Indian Philosophy. She's currently a research fellow at Mythic. It's a global tech-driven company. So she will speak today on the place of Sri Adi Shankaracharyaji's contribution in the history of Vedanta. Manjushri ji, over to you.
Namaste, and a very good evening to everybody, and a very heartfelt thank you to the organizers of this wonderful opportunity to speak on the occasion of Shankara Jayanti. I've always maintained that the best way to truly celebrate Shankara Jayanti is to study his works, his teachings. So today I want to talk about where Shankaracharya stands in the long, long river of Indian philosophical thought. Who came before him? What did he inherit? What did he clarify? And why does it matter? Now, if you've ever dipped your toes in Vedanta, which is the philosophical tradition rooted in the Upanishads, you quickly notice something surprising, that there isn't just one interpretation. There are many different schools of thought, each with brilliant teachers, each claiming to represent the authentic teaching of the Upanishads, each disagreeing with each other in important ways. So for a spiritual seeker, this becomes a little bewildering. Which school do I follow? Whose interpretation is correct? Or how do I even begin to decide? So my talk is motivated by that concern, a desire to bring certain clarity to this question, especially for those who are new to the system. Made a little bit of a PPT, so I'll just share that with you. So begin with the question, if Shankaracharya was an original thinker, did Shankaracharya invent his philosophy? And the short answer is no. And that is actually a good thing. Shankaracharya himself never claimed to be saying something new. He saw himself as faithfully transmitting a tradition that was already ancient in its time. One of the most important things we can do To truly understand and appreciate Shankaracharya is to trace the lineage of thought that he was part of, to see that the ideas that he articulated so brilliantly had deep roots going back centuries before him. So this does two things for us. First, it shows us that Advaita, the philosophy of non-duality that Shankaracharya is famous for, was not a sudden invention, but a living tradition with a long history. Second, it also helps us to distinguish the core of the tradition from ideas that may have crept in over time from others. So, in order to understand Shankaracharya's lineage, we go back to the foundational text called the Brahma Sutras, which is a systematic summary of the teachings of the Upanishads, which is compiled by sage Badarayana. This text is itself part of a tradition already in motion because it quotes by name 7 earlier thinkers and their interpretations. These were all scholars, teachers who wrestled with the Upanishads before Badarayana even wrote the sutras. So in one particularly fascinating section, 3 of these ancient thinkers are brought into direct conversation with each other. They're all trying to resolve the same puzzle, a puzzle which is posed by, in a very beautiful, very profound passage from one of the oldest Upanishads, the Brihadaranyaka. So I'll take that small passage. It comes from a dialogue between sage Yajnavalkya and his wife Maitreyi. It's one of the most moving conversations in all Indian literature. So Yajnavalkya says to Maitreyi, a husband is dear to his wife, not for the sake of the husband, for the sake of the self. Everything dear to us is dear not for its own sake, but for the sake of the self. Therefore, Maitreyi, it is the self that must be known, heard about, reflected upon, meditated upon. When the self is known, everything is known. When you, for example, you love someone, whether it's your husband, your child, your dearest friend, you do not in truth love them for their own sake. You love them for the sake of yourself. If your husband were to die, your grief would not be for him, it would be for yourself, for the loss you experience, the absence that you must now inhabit. The beloved in this analysis is not the object of love. The self is always the object of love. Everything we cherish because of what it means to us, what it gives us, how it completes us. At the center of every act of apparent devotion to another, Yajnavalkya suggests, is a prior, more fundamental devotion to oneself. It is from this insight that he draws his conclusion. If the self is, in fact, the deepest object of all love, of all longing, then it is the self that deserves the most rigorous attention. Know that self, he declares. Hear about it, reflect about it, meditate upon it. To know that self is to know everything. This passage, however, gives rise to a genuine philosophical difficulty. And it is this difficulty that 3 thinkers set out to resolve. The opening speaks of the individual self, the personal, the embodied self that desires, that grieves, and reaches towards others. But the conclusion gestures towards something entirely different, a supreme or universal self, the infinite ground underlying all of existence. So how do these two fit together? Are they the same? Are they different? How do we recoil this or reconcile this? This is not a trivial question. It is the central question of Vedantic philosophy. And the 3 ancient thinkers each gave a slightly different answer. And in doing so, they revealed their deeper views on the relationship between the individual self and the ultimate reality. So we look at each of their positions very briefly and see how Shankaracharya himself resolved this ancient debate. So the first is a teacher named Ashmaratya. His answer to this puzzle was essentially this. The individual self and the supreme self are both different and identical simultaneously. They're related in the way that clay and clay pot are related. The pot is not the same as clay. You can tell them apart. But the pot is nothing but clay. There is difference and there is non-difference woven together. Think of fire and its sparks. The sparks shoot out from the fire, and in one sense, they are separate. Each spark is its own little flame. But in another sense, they're nothing but fire. There's no spark without fire. So, this is the image that Ashmaratya used to describe how individual souls relate to the ultimate reality. So, this philosophy holding both difference and non-difference at once is called Bheda Bheda, which simply means difference and non-difference. The second thinker is named Audulu, and his answer is subtly different. He said, right now, as long as we are embodied, as long as we are living in these bodies caught up in the world, the individual self and the supreme self are distinct. They are different. But through sincere spiritual practice, through meditation, inner purification, when a person attains true knowledge and finally departs the body at death, the individual self dissolves completely into the supreme self, like a river flowing in the ocean. Very beautiful image. Rivers have different names and forms, but when they pour into the ocean, those names and forms are gone. There's only the ocean. So according to Audulu, this is what liberation looks like. For Audulu, there is difference during life, complete identity after death, at liberation. He too, in the end, affirms that the individual self and the supreme are ultimately one, just that the merger happens at the point of liberation. Third thinker is SaVijnanam, and his position is the most radical. And as we shall see, it's the closest to Shankaracharya's own. SaVijnanam said that the supreme self itself appears as the individual self. Not that the individual self eventually becomes the supreme self. Not that partly the same, partly different. Rather, from the ultimate standpoint, there is only supreme self. Always, already, without exception. The appearance of an individual self, separate and limited, is just that, an appearance. And this is Shankaracharya's own standpoint. Shankaracharya explains it using an insight that becomes the cornerstone of his entire philosophy. There are two levels of seeing reality. At the everyday practical level, the level at which we live our lives, the individual self appears real and distinct. At the ultimate level, there is only Brahman, one undivided reality. Upanishads speak at both levels, and when you understand which particular passage is operating at, all the apparent contradictions dissolve. But this isn't just a philosophical position, it is a remarkably elegant method of reading the Upanishads. Every passage, without exception, can be understood as pointing towards the same truth. The really important observation here is that despite their differences, despite all the three ancient thinkers agree on this fundamental point, in the state of liberation, the individual self and the supreme self are one. Not one of them teaches that the two are eternally, absolutely separate. Not one. So what this tells us is that at the time when these ancient debates were happening, there was no school of thought that taught the permanent absolute difference between the individual soul and Brahman. That idea simply did not exist in the Vedantic tradition at that stage. So the entire debate was about how the self is Brahman, not whether they are ultimately one. So the Upanishads were universally understood as teaching some form of oneness at the deepest level. And it is into this tradition that Shankaracharya was born, a tradition that, for all its internal disagreements, never wavered on that central conviction. So Shankaracharya is not an innovator who invented a new philosophy. He's the most articulate, most rigorous, most systematically complete representative of a tradition that stretches back to the oldest place. So before him, the tradition held a general consensus with many internal variations and debates, but Shankaracharya gave that tradition its most precise and uncompromising philosophical expression. So in short, Shankaracharya stands at the summit of a long mountain ridge. Mountains were already there, simply climbed the highest, and from that height made it possible for all of us to see the entire landscape clearly. So on Shankara Jayanti, so the most fitting tribute is not merely to celebrate Shankaracharya as a great man, certainly was, but to recognize what he himself always insisted, that the truth is eternal, flows from the Upanishads, was carried by a long line of teachers, and is available to anyone who approaches it with sincerity, humility, and a genuine desire to know. This is the spirit of the tradition he embodied. Just wanted to share this small little passage from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad to share how he came from a long line representing. Thank you very much.
Dhanyavad ji, thank you so much for the wonderful presentation, your valuable insights. I would now like to invite our next speaker, Dr. Suryanarayana Jamalamadaka ji. So besides being a Vedic scholar who's been attending many platforms and presenting his views and sharing his knowledge, Suryanarayan ji is also the co-founder of Karishye, which is an initiative that creates an ecosystem of products and services to deliver the profound riches of Sanatana Dharma, and it is also a one-stop solution for puja-related needs. He is also a co-founder of Sri Kameshwari Foundation. It's dedicated to the exploration and promotion of Indic knowledge systems, encompassing both Astika and Nastika traditions, and showcasing the intellectual heritage of Bharat. He will be speaking today on the relevance and importance of Advaita Vedanta in a multipolar world. Namaste, Suryanarayan ji. Over to you.
Namasarvebhya. I'm very happy that today Vijnana Bharati gave me this opportunity to share my limited knowledge with all of you. So I'm very happy that we all are meeting today to understand Shankara's view on Shankara Jayanti. So I was just going through the names of the attendees, and the reality is that all of us are now naming ourselves, or we are named related to the Sanatana Dharma. So we have Manjushri ji, Ramanathan ji, Shrikant, myself Suryanarayana, we have Amrutesh, Anand. These all are the names I can see in the participants list. So why are we named like this? And who actually helped us to continue at least naming ourselves with those Puranas, with those Itihasas, with those Upasana Paddhatis, everything rooted in the Sanatana Dharma. And we also have some names which are directly related to the Vedas also. And all this credit actually goes to that man who actually reoriented ourselves, reoriented our civilization towards the Sanatana. Recently, I went to an Upanayana 2 days earlier. And in the last month also, I went to a marriage ceremony. If I go through the entire ceremony, it is as it is how Apastamba told us to perform and understand. Why? If we just see the other civilizations who are contemporary to ours, like if we see the Egyptian civilization or the Mesopotamian or the other civilizations, we can't see such ceremonies. I don't want to use the word ritual because we have a lot of knowledge, contemplation, orientation involved in all the karmakanda we perform. So the credit also goes to this man who reoriented our civilization towards the root from where we all drew our inspiration. So how are we at the time of Shankaracharya? Before Shankaracharya came into this, avatara, we were still Sanatana. We were still having, Veda Parampara. There are large temples. There are large Vaidika kingdoms also. But what happened is that everyone went into the depth of each of their Anushtana Paddhati. Everyone went to that depth that they forgot the network. They forgot the interrelation. They forgot what is the samanvaya? How should I understand this particular parampara and how it is leading to the eternal truth? That was missed. And when rajas, which is action orientedness, that is the other way that we can define rajas. That is the function of rajas. When most of us, most of the leaders became action oriented and conflict arose, and we lost some traditions because of fighting between each of the traditions, and that samanvaya drishti broke. That is why Shankaracharya's work, which gives us a lot of light on all these things, like how to do the samanvaya, why this particular ceremony is very important, and how to draw the inspiration from that. For example, if we take Prasthanatraya, I hope all of us know what is Prasthanatraya. Prasthana is steps and Traya is 3. And he wrote the Bhashya on 3 steps, 3 Prasthanas. Number 1 is called as Shruti Prasthana. Shruti here is Upanishad. And we have Smriti Prasthana, Bhagavad Gita. We also have the Nyaya Prasthana, which is very, very important, where we wanted Shankaracharya's understanding. Both in Upanishad and I feel, both in Upanishad and Nyaya Prasthana, if we didn't have Shankara, we would have lost most of our, what you say, comprehensive understanding, most of our samanvaya drishti. I don't think there is another way in which we could actually understand this samanvaya. For example, if we take Ishavasyopanishad, his style of presenting itself is that samanvaya drishti. The style in which Shankaracharya writes is a very, very Gomukha Vyaghra style. Gomukha Vyaghra means, in the beginning, if we see, it seems very simple, like all the words are simple. There are no poetic, unnecessary ornamentation or the alankara to the words and all those things. It would be very simple in the beginning. But there is a depth, there is a lot of depth inside, because by the time Shankaracharya came, there was a lot of confusion, because Mimamsakas were telling that continuous karmakanda or only focusing on Swarga is the only way. That is what Mimamsakas were telling, and it is a very profound way where lot of contemplation was happening, and most of the Vaidika tradition people were only following Mimamsa. And Mimamsa was just ignoring the second half or the main rasa, sara of the Shruti, which is the Vedanta. The name Vedanta has the Vigrahavakya, Vedasya Antaha. Antaha means inside. So what is inside of Veda? What is the insider's view or understanding of Veda? What is the essence of Veda that comes in the Vedanta? And the Mimamsakas told that the entire Vedanta might be taken as Arthavada, which is not actually the main intention of the Vedas. And that is how Mimamsakas lost that samanvaya drishti. And in the other way, where region-oriented upasanas were happening, like there is Shakta tradition, there is Ganapatya tradition, there is Saura tradition, Shaiva tradition, Vaishnava tradition. All these traditions went into that depth that they couldn't actually see the entire picture in one way. So what happened? The rajas in the leaders of those traditions started fighting. Whenever they got more opportunity, they were trying to oppress or suppress the other way around. Recently, I had an opportunity to talk about the stotras Shankaracharya wrote, because all these people are actually into the Sanatana Dharma only, but philosophically they are not aligned with the original thought. What is the original thought? We all know that is Tattvamasi, Aham Brahmasmi, Neha Nanasti Kinchana. These are the original thoughts of Advaita. And as rightly told by my previous speaker also, Shankaracharya is not the first person who is proposing all these things. They are there in our tradition. Everywhere, wherever we go, we go through the literature in the Mahabharata, in the Bhagavata, in the Ramayana, and also in other what you say, Smritis and other Gitas. Everywhere we see this oneness or the Advaita philosophy prevailing. And we have scholarly drishti whenever we have that. Whenever we don't think about the original purpose of life or what will be the ideal purpose of life and all these things, we all get away with the senses, we all get away with the buddhi, the strategic yourself, we all get away with the respect or what is the importance I am getting and all these things. So that is where we draw our happiness generally. But this is not long lasting. All experienced seekers and all what you say, people who traveled through the life from the different twists and turns, they understand that this is not the eternal thing that we have to reach, or we have to plan where to reach. But in giving the commentary or creating the stotra literature, he very beautifully brings all those aspects of different people, all those orientations, all the Shakta oriented people, all the Shaiva oriented people, all the Vaishnava oriented people towards that self, towards telling that how to understand that I myself is Vishnu, I myself is Shiva, I myself is the Subramanya. He didn't leave any one tradition untouched. So if we see his stotra literature, there are around 70 stotras what Shankaracharya created. In those 70 stotras, we see Shaiva, we see Vaishnava, we see Shakta, we see what you say, Subramanya stotras, we see Rama stotras. We also see a very, very different kind of stotra, which is not related to any one particular tradition, but it is mainly towards teaching the seeker how to understand what is the way in which I can daily orient myself. It is like a guided meditation kind of a thing. It is like a orientation program, or it is a orientation module in which we can orient ourselves daily. Those are very, very simple ones. Like there are only 3 or 4 shlokas in most of them. So each one of that stotra is dealing about one particular aspect in which we are struck. Some of us are struck in the Manomaya. Manomaya is related to the emotional or relational thing where we relate to ourselves. And some things are related to the Vichara or the Buddhimaya Kosha. And some are related to even lower realms also. So that is how he created those curated orientation modules also. That is one thing. And when we go back to the Upanishads, so Upanishads like the Upanishad Bhashya of Ishavasya, Upanishad Bhashya of Prashnopanishad, Upanishad Bhashya of Taittiriya Upanishad, and all those things, at particular junctions where there is some complexity, or in some junctions where there is what you say, confusion. So there we need Shankaracharya's guidance, where he is actually simplifying everything and telling the actual what you say, intention of that particular Upanishad. In the same way, if we go back to the Brahma Sutras, if we don't have Shankaracharya's commentary on Brahma Sutras, even now also we would have continuously been fighting about how to understand, or what is the path in which we have to understand that Aham Brahmasmi, or Tattvamasi, or Neha Nanasti Kinchana, or how to not get confused by understanding different darshanas, because by that time itself, all the darshanas, or all the Shad darshanas, the Sankhya, the Vaisheshika, Nyaya, everything grew at its best. So if you touch each darshana, you will have very diverse or very, rich idea already grown. So if somebody is trapped into only that one particular dimension, he couldn't actually go back to any Shruti and relate. He couldn't go back to any Gita. Gita is, there are many types of Gitas. We have Ashtavakra Gita, we have Shiva Gita, we have Bhagavad Gita, many Gitas. All the Gitas also are intended towards that oneness only. So how to relate from the Vishada of Rama to oneness? How to relate from the Vishada of Arjuna to oneness? So this is how those Gitas are also weaved. So without Shankaracharya's simple commentary and correlating Shruti, Smruti, Prasthanas to the Nyaya Prasthana, quoting Upanishads, quoting different Upanishads, quoting Brihadaranyaka, quoting Prashnopanishad. For simple one idea itself, he gives us different examples, because one object can be seen from different dimensions and can understood better. So that is why, even though giving one explanation is enough, but he will not stop there. He will try to give all related explanations from different Upanishads and convince the seeker. So his idea is that to convince the seeker that you have to reorient to yourself without attaching to Indriya, without attaching to Manas, without attaching to the other worldly things what our Indriyas actually directly perceive. So that is a very beautiful thing. And Neha Nanasti Kinchana is one profound idea where we see Shankaracharya's beautiful commentary on that. Because whenever we understand the world using our memory, using our senses, using our inferential processes, we always understand that this world is different and it is filled with multiplicity. We have different people, we have different species, we have different material, everything is different. But how to see that one thing in all those things? So that is where we need Acharya's guidance. And I hope, and I actually feel also whenever we are interacting with great personalities like our gurus, Brahmashri, Manidravida Shastrigal, Krishnamurti Shastrigal, and other upasakas who are in the depth of their upasana. Whenever they are talking, we understand that they are experiencing what Acharya wanted us to experience. How to understand that oneness is experiential everywhere, even though you are right now seeing the world in a multiple way. My previous speaker also talked about the Pratibhasika Satta, Vyavaharika Satta, and Paramarthika Satta. This is how he beautifully tried to explain us. Whenever you are observing and understanding this world, you are understanding the existence of multiple objects around you. That is happening because of the Vyavaharika Satta, or the transactional existence of objects around you. But when we actually shift our gear to the Paramarthika Satta is a existence which is eternal. So when you switch your gear to that Paramarthika Satta, you can observe and experience the oneness everywhere. So this is how he gave us multiple frameworks. So one framework is this. We also have different frameworks like the Bimba Pratibimbavada, Avachedya Avachedakavada, and many other things. So all these frameworks are those pathways from which we can travel and understand that oneness and become one, experience it, Anubhuti Param. So that is how Shankaracharya led us towards becoming one. and experiencing that oneness. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Dhanyavad ji, thank you so much for taking us through the relevance and importance of Advaita Vedanta and explaining the oneness that has been elucidated by Sri Jagadguru Adi Shankaracharya ji. So moving on to the next speaker, we have with us Professor Srikant Vedantam ji. So he's a professor in the Department of Engineering Design at IIT Madras, and he specializes in computational modeling of materials, including phase field and discrete particle models. He's also associated with the Department of Medical Sciences and Technology and has served as the head of the Department of Engineering Design. So in spite of all these academic background in terms of the technical side, he still will today bring in a unique perspective connecting philosophy with practice, and he will highlight majorly about Advaita not merely being a post-retirement pursuit, but more of a practical guide for everyday living. So with this, I invite Professor Srikant Vedantam ji. Namaste ji, welcome.
धन्यवादः वागर्थाविव सम्पृक्तौ वागर्थप्रतिपत्तये जगतः पितरौ वन्दे पार्वती परमेश्वरौ नमः सर्वेभ्यः वयं सर्वे अत्र मिलितवन्तः इति अस्मिन् शुभसन्दर्भे शङ्करजयन्ती शुभसन्दर्भे मिलितवन्तः इति महान् सन्तोषः I am very happy that we are all meeting here on this joyous occasion of Shankara Jayanti. And I am really happy that we are all spending some time thinking about his accomplishments, and hopefully with that we'll grow as people. That is our eventual goal, I hope. So I know when people think of Advaita, it is an intellectual tour de force. It is something that people spend a lot of time intellectualizing, and there's lots of depth to it. However, I do want to emphasize that there is a lot of practical applications that we can take to real world. And I just want to highlight just a small couple of points in the few minutes that I will be talking about this. First thing, we first have to recall his contributions, and I am indeed honored to be following Suryanarayana Garu and Manjushri ma'am. They are, of course, very accomplished people, but and they have already mentioned some of his accomplishments, but I just thought I will put some of my the points together. So basically, the first thing we have to recognize is that Adi Shankara was an intellectual giant, and we just have to basically talk about, we have to really emphasize that. And I'm trying to go into full screen mode and it is not, okay, that's okay, I'll just leave it here. And the very interesting thing, and we have to really note, is that he has relied on a very, very logical and very scientific approach of a combination of Shruti and followed by logic. We are calling it logic in the current parlance, but it has its own basis to it, and we will not go into that. But basically, Shruti is the axioms, is the foundation on which we build our thesis, and the logic takes us to our conclusions. And it's a very, very scientific approach. And the other, we have to really talk about, we have to discuss this and we have to think about it is, Adi Shankara understood and refuted all his opposing viewpoints, every one of them, with great respect and with a great understanding. And he did not dismiss any one of them lightly. So that makes his abilities stand out in relation to everybody else that we know of. And this is very relevant. The next point is very relevant to the current world. And a previous speakers also mentioned this. Adi Shankaracharya worked tirelessly in the short period of time that he was here with us, of his avatara. And that is something I think we all should take to heart. And he has established at least four, maybe more, 1,300-year-old institutions. Who in the world can claim to have done that in a short period of time? They are living institutions that are continuing to grow and benefit society. So we really can take all of this, even though we think about Advaita as a very esoteric subject, which is an intellectual pursuit, you can see that there is an application that he has shown in a very systematic fashion. So, and then at this point, which people really don't talk about when we talk about Advaita, is his reinforcement of bhakti and what we call lightly rituals in the modern parlance of English. And people take it lightly. People say, oh, I'm spiritual, not religious. But Adi Shankaracharya literally emphasized all of this for a reason. Okay. And it has a very important significance because it grounds us and moves the locus from a very egocentric fashion. It helps us move the first locus out. So then the next point I would like to make, I'm just going to make 3 points in this talk. The next point I'd like to make is actually, this is not to do with particularly Adi Shankaracharya's Advaita, but it's about our entire Darshana tradition, where I just now mentioned how Adi Shankaracharya took the effort to learn about competing viewpoints, opponent viewpoints, and yet has performed a discussion about that and shown how his approach was more relevant. So I think that gives us all a lesson in this current world where we are all hyper fragmented. Everybody has their own viewpoint and they think they are correct. But if all of us begin to first understand what the other person is saying, and if we are able to present the opponent's viewpoint in its entirety without caricaturing it, I think we are all going to start moving towards a greater understanding of each other, and it'll help us get along with us much better. Of course, this requires amazing self-confidence because we have to be very grounded in what we have understood and we have to be able to understand the opponent. And I think it is worthwhile for us to spend. And if we do that, it enhances our own understanding of our thought processes. And it will also tell us that, everybody, when they're presenting their opposing viewpoint, is coming from a place where they have a certain foundations that they are relying on. So I think this is definitely something that Shankaracharya has shown in every one of his writings. And I believe that we can first start there, even before we get to the deeper scope of the Advaitic philosophical viewpoint. So first of all, how do we continue to talk with each other? We have to understand what is the topic we are talking. Adi Shankaracharya in his Chatusruti definitely lays that out in a very systematic fashion. What is the topic? Who's the audience? What is the connection between the topic and the audience? And what is the whole point in which we are trying to present? I think if we just start with this as a foundation, we will really be able to first get clarity and really get along with other viewpoints and understand it and get much more better interpersonal relations. And we should also be very clear about what is the evidence that the other person is willing to listen to and what evidence that we have. So this, I believe, is one of the points that while it's not directly related to Advaita, I really wanted to share with this group because I thought it would be a something that will be useful for us to try to employ in our daily program. So whenever we come across a viewpoint from somebody else, we'll examine it from these perspectives. I think it will really help us understand far better. Then I'll spend just a few more minutes talking about, of course, the most famous shloka of Adi Shankaracharya, Shlokadhena Pravakshami Yaduktam Grantha Kotivihi Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya Jivo Brahmeva Naparaha. So this, of course, this shloka encompasses the entire Advaita philosophy of Adi Shankara. And I would like to make a few points related to this and how it helps us in our daily world and how we can conduct ourselves in a day-to-day. I know Advaita seems very contradictory to the daily world, and I'm trying to see if we can make that point about how actually it really does help us out. So we first look at this mithya, and many times people just translate it as unreal. But I think we really need to clarify what is real, because in fact, Suryanarayan Garu and Manjushri, madam before that, have just talked about this particular thing about that unreal aspect. I think we need to clarify a little bit, and I believe I want to emphasize these 3 points. One is unreal means the impermanence of our transactional world. So that means everything that we see, we know we have to be aware all the time that it's not permanent. Not permanent means that not that it will go away completely, but it will change. Change in a very, very different ways. One is it could just, just break down and collapse. Other, from an observational viewpoint, it might change. For example, we have bought a new trinket, a new jewelry, a new watch, and we really like it a lot. It may be working 6 months later, but our relationship to it is impermanent. We do not like it as much as we did earlier. So that impermanence or the change is something that pervades this entire Advaita philosophy. And I think if we bring that into our day-to-day view of how we operate in the real world, it really will help us in a very systematic, in a very really proper fashion. And the fact is, more information about that will make us change our minds about whether we like it more or we like it less, and so on. So this is the unreal aspect. So lots of times in Advaita, we just say this world is unreal. But what does that mean? If we keep these 3 points, and there's certainly a lot more points that the scholars like Surendra Garu can explain to us, but I'm just keeping it short, these 3 points, that it's impermanent, it's dependent on how we view things, and that more information makes us change our minds. And if you really think about it, this is a very scientific approach. Anything, even in science right now, what we do is we first try to find out what is the use of what we are trying to do. And then we try to collect information. And then we try to make a judgment. But we keep that fact that the judgment is only under advisement. It is not a permanent judgment. It could change provided we get more information. So this amazingly is also very, has this parallel with our current scientific process. So I think we should really imbibe it in everything else we do. Of course, science has its own process. But what I want to point out to everybody is that even we can try to take that process into what we do every day. So what does this mean? So what it tells us is we should take a big picture perspective. We should tell us that whatever happened is not permanent. Things change. Our own view of that incident or object could change. And our own requirements might change. And we might change our minds with more information. So I think this will really help us transact in our world. And this is all the foundation of the Advaitic framework. Then the second half of the shloka, of the fourth quarter actually, is Jivo Brahmaiva Naparaha, that there is this substratum that pervades all of us, and all of us are embedded in that substratum, where other creatures appear to tug in different directions. It's just all appearances. And we have to work with that, and we have to develop the perspective of what it is. I'm not, of course, going to go in too much detail about this. The fact is, if we are also keeping these aspects, and it, by the way, it does not come spontaneously to all of us. We need to spend time thinking about, of course, spending time with a guru, thinking about it, and of course, trying to internalize these points. I believe really that all of this is not abstract, something that is out there, paravidya, but it is like something that we can use currently in our current world. So I'd like to conclude, since we are really running out of time, that I really want all of us to really take the view. Of course, there is a lot of the Advaitic framework has a lot of depth, and it takes years and years, and there's mountains of materials that we have to cover. But I think if we start by saying it will make today better, whatever we learn will help us today in how we view things, how we take the good versus the bad, the rough versus the smooth. I think it really will help us and it'll give us a direction. It'll give us a motivation to continue along this path. And as we continue to gain more, we'll only be that much better. So I want to emphasize to all of us, and I think to myself as well in the process, that this is not a process that is to be put off till retirement. We should all be on this every day. Jalabindu nipatena kramasha puryate ghataha. With a drop by drop, we hope that the pot will get full soon, sometime later. We don't know when it is, but we should make sure that the drop is falling every day. So, and we have to reinforce these lessons. We have to spend our time trying to internalize this. We have to learn from the gurus. We have to discuss with our peers. We have to reinforce within ourselves and teach our kids that this is all a perspective. There is a perspective that is driving all our decisions, all our emotions, all the way we interact with our external world. And that perspective has to bring in the fact that this is impermanent. Impermanent does not mean that it necessarily get destroyed, but it will change. The person who is really getting anxious about buying that next car, expensive car or expensive iPhone or something, has to recognize that their own connection with that object is likely to change in a very short period of time. So if they recognize that their interaction with that object, while they can still use it in a productive fashion, it will not consume them. It will not destroy their peace of mind. And we have to recognize that there's always an observer that is interacting with the world. And so if we all take a step back and take the big picture approach, I believe this process and this framework will benefit us immensely. With that, dhanyavadaha. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity.
Aditya ji, I think.
Dhanyavad. So, as a concluding remark, I would like to request Dr. Ramanathan ji to kindly take us through what has happened today and what are his final words on today's session. Dr. Ramanathan ji.
Yeah, thank you once again. It has been a good jolly go ride, starting from the technical exposition of what Shankara's work is, how we need to look at it by Dr. Manjushri Hegde. Although, as we all have put it, that this is just a beginning and we need more such expositions in the days to come so that we can hear each one of these speakers in larger length. So with that, Dr. Manjushri Hegde reinforced that Shankara has to be looked upon as the good articulator and not just a generator or a creator of a different school of thought. The aspects were there before him. There were 7 acharyas who were quoted. And then how he must be looked upon as the best articulator. Something what resonated with Dr. Vedantam was trying to say how to talk to each other, how to articulate in a most effective manner, because that is where the second talk by Dr. Jammala Madaka comes into context, how to bring the samanvaya, because it is quite natural that once you get into a complacent mode, the growth kind of stops. That's attested in every civilization. So that is where you need an internal churning. And our civilization has been fortunate enough to have this internal churning and produce people from time to time and again from within the civilization who comes and reminds us. And that's how the samanvaya comes. That's one word of caution when we say that people fought against each other while oppressing the other counter ideas. One has to be very careful in putting across the terminology. It's not that people were behind each other's blood if the thought or the views were not matching with them. It's like Vada, Jalpa, Vitanda. All these ways of discourses were there just to establish your paksha, but it is not to kind of, in my limited understanding, it is not to take away the life of the other person whom you do not agree with. So the word, when we say fight in a very loose manner, it gives a completely opposite picture. That brings us to the last speaker, Dr. Vedantam, who tried to, we didn't do justice to each of these speakers by giving them a good enough time, but in the limited time that we had given them, they did justice in the case of bringing how relevant it is that Advaita is not just a post-retirement tour de force, but it's something that we had to think about it in the current time as well. He talked about one point which got impressed me, that which triggered my memory, that in order to maintain the qualm, the equipoisedness while refuting the other's argument, one needs to have a supreme confidence. And we all know what Shankara had the confidence, of course, in his Nirvana Shatkam. He clearly displays his confidence. But more than that confidence, I wanted to share this in Praudhanubhuti. He clearly says who he is. And having said that in a couple of 16 shlokas, who he is in Praudhanubhuti, the last line that he concludes is very important. Sachen markata hasta desha patita kim rajate ketaki. Once again, I repeat, Sachen markata hasta desha patita kim rajate ketaki. So he has shown his prowess in the 16 shlokas, and finally he is lamenting if such a thing falls in the hands, if Ketaki flower falls in the hands of a monkey, then what would happen to the fate of the monkey? So we are talking about this multipolar world where how Advaita can really help and not make this Advaita fall in the hands of monkeys, and this Ketaki should not be withered away. I request that I will be allowed to share one prasanga. Exactly 60 years, very interestingly, exactly 60 years back, when Bharata Ratna M.S. Subbulakshmi was invited in the United Nations General Assembly, she approached Kanchi Mahapariva Sri Chandrasekharendra Saraswati, and for that occasion he wrote a song consisting of just 6 lines. And Bharata Ratna Srimati M.S. Subbulakshmi sang it, and I felt no other befitting tribute than to conclude this session with showing her rendition. So I may be allowed to share the thing. Just give me a minute, and I hope the audio will not create a problem. I have put both the lyrics as well as the audio in it, so that you can.
1500 மனம் கவர்ந்த பாடல்கள் அடங்கிய கீபேட் கார்வா மொபைல்.
Sorry, this was the song copied was different. I'll just read out the song. This was Maitri Bhajata by Chandrasekharendra Saraswati, sung by M.S. Subbulakshmi. Maitrim Bhajata Akhila Hridayatrim Atmavadeva Paranapi Pashyata. The meanings are highlighted in yellow, given in Hindi here. Very briefly in English, you see the friendship or the Maitri Bhava in everybody, and as you see and respect yourself, try to see everybody else. Yuddham Tyajata Spardham Tyajata. Leave aside the conflicts, leave aside unnecessary competitions. Tyajata Pareshu Akramam Akramanam. You do not kind of दूसरों पर अनुचित आक्रमण करना छोड़ दो. You do not kind of enforce yourself unnecessarily in others' boundaries. Janani Prithvi Kamadughaste. This Mother Earth has enough resources for everybody's need. Janako Deva Sakala Dayaluhu. And this Ishvara is the father of everybody, and he is ever compassionate. Damyata Datta Dayadhvam Janata. This is an Upanishadic statement where it says that you have your self-refrain, you engage in giving to others, and you have compassion in you. Shreyo Bhuyat Sakala Jananam. And that's how we can have the welfare of the entire world. So what best tribute can we expect from Advaita for the world peace coming from Shankara's own lineage and his own followers? So with that, I once again thank the organizers for organizing this and giving me this wonderful opportunity. Thank you very much.
Dhanyavad Ramanathanji for your beautiful Samanvaya, bringing together all the diverse perspectives of today's discussions into a coherent and insightful whole. So our sincere gratitude to Dr. Manjushri Hegdeji, Dr. Suryanarayana Jamalamadagaji, and Professor Srikant Vedantamji for joining us today and sharing their valuable insights on Advaita Vedanta and the topic of today, which is non-dualism in a multipolar world. There are a few questions which have been coming in the chat bot. However, we'll be sharing a form to all of you where you can share your feedback on today's session, your opinions on today's topic, as well as ask some queries, which we will further pass it on to our speakers and they can answer as well. But for that, you will have to ensure that you have registered via the link. If you haven't, the link is there in the chat box. You can see it and you can please fill it in. Yeah? We'll be having more such sessions and we'll be having much more interactive sessions in the days to come. So we wish you keep attending all these sessions. And once again, dhanyawad to everyone. And to conclude today's session, I request Vishnu Parashara Muniji from IIT Gandhinagar to kindly invoke the Shanti Mantra. Vishnuji.
Shanti Mantra. Sarve bhavantu sukhinah, sarve santu niramayah, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschid dukkha bhat bhaved. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
धन्यवाद सभी को, धन्यवाद।
धन्यवाद जी।
धन्यवाद जी। नमस्ते।
धन्यवाद जी।